Jaya Rama Rama Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Divarga Gopi Jana Vallabha Divarga Gopi Jana Vallabha Divarga Yashodanandana Prajanaranja Yashodanandana Prajanaranja Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Kodanitai Jaya Maya Pushachi Jaya Kodanitai Jaya Maya Pushachi Jaya Shri Chatsina Jaya Shri Chatsina Shri Chatsina Jaya Shri Chatsina Jaya Giridhari La Jaya Giridhari La Giridhari La Jaya Giridhari La Jaya Nrsingadev Jaya Nrsingadev Nrsingadev Jaya Nrsingadev Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Guru Parampara ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki, Jai Gaur Premanandi. I'm just reading about Ramanuja Acaryas. I'm not reading from the back.
We need to do the verse according to our guidelines.
Sorry, I'll find the verse in
In the first canto.
Can you find one, Raghunath? Can you choose one?
Yeah.
Just something. Should do 118, Raghunath. 118. So we're reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Uniting Two Worlds, The Lame Man and the Blind Man, New York City, July the 9th, 1976. Jayananda was driving the car. Tamal Krishna Goswami and Rameshwara Swami were also there. They had picked up Srila Prabhupada and Hari Sori at LaGuardia Airport, and as they proceeded toward Manhattan, Prabhupada asked, "Things are going on here nicely?" Prabhupada replied that everything had really just begun. "You will see that all of the work is just in progress," he said. "Yes," said Srila Prabhupada, "manage nicely. Krishna is giving us everything. There is no scarcity. If we simply sincerely work, Krishna will give us intelligence, everything. By his mercy, everything is available. That is Krishna. He can give you anything." As their car approached the colossal Brooklyn Bridge, Srila Prabhupada inquired, "That is Brooklyn Bridge, I think? Sometimes I was coming here and sitting down near the bridge." "Near the water?" asked Tamal Krishna. They were fascinated to hear of Srila Prabhupada's early activities alone in New York. "You were sitting near the water?" Yes, that river, said Prabhupada, because I was on that Bowery Street. It is not very far away. So I was coming, walking there and sitting under that bridge and thinking, when shall I return to India? He laughed. He asked about other places, inquiring, almost like inquiring about old friends, the Fulton Street subway station and Chambers Street. Tamal Krishna told Prabhupada that the ISKCON Center was not Krishna is right in the midst of the theatre, restaurant, and entertainment section of the city. In New York, said Prabhupada, I feel a little at home, because first I came here. I was loitering on the street here and there. From 1965 September to July 1967, continually I stayed in New York. Tamal Krishna Maharaj gave a class this morning, said Rameshwara Swami. He was explaining that we cannot understand the good fortune of this city, that you have come here. Yes, when I decided that I shall go to a foreign country, said Prabhupada, I never thought of going to London. I thought of coming here. Generally they go to London, but I thought, no, I shall go to New York. Very progressive, Tamal Krishna commented. I do not know, Prabhupada laughed. It is Krishna's dictation. I could have gone, London was nearer, but I thought, no, I shall go to New York. Sometimes I was even dreaming that I had gone to New York. As they passed through various neighborhoods, Srila Prabhupada recalled the old days. He mentioned Dr. Mishra's yoga studio and his room at 172nd Street, where his tape recorder and typewriter had been stolen. The West End Superette, where he would buy fruit. Sometimes I think I was coming to this part, said Prabhupada, looking out the window. Aimlessly, yes, sometimes walking on 2nd Avenue. Acknowledging his senior disciple, who was steadily and silently driving the car, Prabhupada said, our Jayananda was driving a taxi and chanting Hare Krishna, and one day he brought me $5,000. It was given for publishing of Bhagavad Gita, but I think Macmillan took it. Then you put him in charge to sell all the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, said Tamal Krishna, I remember. Didn't sell too many books though, said Jayananda. Prabhupada laughed while Jayananda remained silent, intent on the task of driving through the city. I thought he was the best, most appropriate person to drive you, said Tamal Krishna. He was chanting and driving, said Prabhupada. Very good boy. As they weaved through Manhattan traffic, a taxi driver shouted at them. What does he say? Asked Prabhupada. He said, you have a nice car, said Tamal Krishna. That's good. They liked the car. Prabhupada laughed, asked him, why don't you come here? Why are you driving a taxi? Come join us. This car is the Ford Company's version of a Cadillac, said Rameshwara. They cannot understand because we say we are not after material opulence for ourselves. They cannot understand why we drive in these cars. They think that we unnecessarily criticize, said Prabhupada, but we require everything. Just like a man when he is alive, his decoration, his nice dress, everything is good. But if he is dead, then it is useless. Similarly, without spiritual consciousness, we are dead, because the body is dead. Only because the spirit soul is there, therefore it is moving. The important point is the spirit soul. So if you are simply taking care of the body nicely, that means you are decorating the dead body. What is the value of it? Is it clear? The body is important because the soul is there. So long the life is there, if you decorate the body, everyone will appreciate. But if you decorate the dead body, everyone will say, what a fool he is. Similarly, without spiritual knowledge, this dead civilization, simply on the bodily concept of life, it is ludicrous. We have to condemn. Take Krishna consciousness, then everything has value. Just like 1, if there is 0, then it becomes 10. Add another 0, it becomes 100. But without that 1, it is simply 0. It is only useless. That 1 is Krishna, said Tamal Krishna, and Krishna's representative, added Rameshwara. Srila Prabhupada ki. There's an amazing new video being produced by the Gurukul students in Mayapur. It's a 3-minute video of Prabhupada speaking about not being the body, with lots of footage from New York, big cities footage, and it's just reminded me that when Prabhupada said it's all ludicrous without understanding that we're the spirit soul. I'll share it with devotees. So today is the anniversary of the appearance day of Sri Ramanuja Acharya, who is one of the acharyas of the 4 Vaishnava Sampradayas. He appeared in the year 1017 in southern India, near the town of Kanchipuram. And he came in a long line of teachers and saintly persons, and he amalgamated and summarized all of that knowledge and made it very clear the path that the Sampradaya was meant to go in. So for that reason he's recognized as the Sampradaya Acharya. He's the Acharya who condensed the knowledge of that Sampradaya. And that Sampradaya originally is coming from Lakshmi Devi. So today is his appearance day. We're going to read about some pastimes, some of his amazing pastimes. First of all, we're going to read from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, Verse 8. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Veta Tram Somya Tat Sarvam. Veta Tram Somya Tat Sarvam. Veta Tram Somya Tat Sarvam. Tatvatas Tatanugrahat. Tatvatas Tatanugrahat. Tatvatas Tatanugrahat. Bruyu Snigdasya Shishyasya. Bruyu Snigdasya Shishyasya. Bruyu Snigdasya Shishyasya. Guravo Guyam Api Uta. Guravo Guyam Apyuta. Guravo Guyam Apyuta. Vetatvam Somya Tat Sarvam. Tatvatas Tadanugrahat. Bruyu Snigdasya Shishyasya. Guravo Guyam Apyuta. Vetatvam Somya Tat Sarvam. Tatvatas Tadanugrahat. Bruyu Snigdasya Shishyasya. Guravo Guyam Apyuta. Vetatvam Somya Tat Sarvam. Tatvatas Tadanugrahat. Bruyu Snigdasya Shishyasya. Guravo Guyam Apyuta. Vetatvam Somya Tat Sarvam. Tatvatas Tadanugrahat Ruyusnigdasya Shrisyasya Guravo Guyamapyuta Etatvam Somya Tatsarvam Tatvatas Tadanugrahat Ruyusnigdasya Shrisyasya Guravo Guyamapyuta Etatvam Somya Tatsavam Tatvatas Tadanugrahat Ruyusnigdasya Shrisyasya Guyavo Guyamapyuta Vaishnavis Etatvam Somya Tatsavam Tatvatas Tadanugrahat Ruyusnigdasya Shishyasya Guravo Guyamapyuta Veta. You are well conversant. Tvam, your honor. Somya, one who is pure and simple. Tat, those. Sarvam, all. Tatvata, in fact. Tat, there. Anugrahat, by the favor of. Bruyu, will tell. Snigdasya, of the one who is submissive. Shishyasya, of the disciple. Gurava, the spiritual masters. Guyam, secret. Api uta, endowed with. Translation. And because you are submissive, your spiritual masters have endowed you with all the favors bestowed upon a gentle disciple. Therefore you can tell us all that you have scientifically learned from them. Please repeat. And because you are submissive, your spiritual masters have endowed you with all the favors bestowed upon a gentle disciple. Therefore you can tell us all that you have scientifically learned from them. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. The secret of success in spiritual life is in satisfying the spiritual master and thereby getting his sincere blessings. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has sung in his famous 8 stanzas on the spiritual master as follows. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master. Only by his satisfaction can one please the personality of Godhead. And when he is dissatisfied, there is only havoc on the path of spiritual realization. It is essential, therefore, that a disciple be very much obedient and submissive to the bona fide spiritual master. Srila Sutta Goswami fulfilled all these qualifications as a disciple, and therefore he was endowed with all favors by his learned and self-realized spiritual masters, such as Srila Vyasadeva and others. The sages of Naimisharanya were confident that Srila Sutta Goswami was bona fide. Therefore, they were anxious to hear from him. Amagyanatimrandasya gananjana shlakaya chakshurumalitam jena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakatamayam Tadati Swapatantikam Anshakapatarubhyascha Kripasinabhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Ramanuja Acharya was definitely a person like Sutta Goswami who was blessed by all of the great acharyas, both living and also those who had passed before him. He was blessed to represent the Sri Sampradaya and to protect the Sri Sampradaya from the attack of atheists, impersonalists, and also from the attack of marauding kings and warlords. He wasn't just a spiritual leader, but he was also a leader of the whole community that surrounded around the 108 Divya Deshams of the Sri Sampradaya, the 108 prominent temples of southern India. So there's vast amounts of literature written about Sri Ramanuja Acharya, and I read a description of his life by a Sri Vaishnava who lived at the end of the 19th century, who had a very good command of English, actually. So I've picked out some pastimes specifically surrounding the early life of Ramanuja Acharya. So he was born into a family of very devoted Vaishnavas. His mother was named Kantimala and his father Keshvacharya. And they lived in a village near to Kanchipuram, which was a well-established temple at that time. And the local residents worshipped the deity of Vadaradev. Vadaradev means the best of the blessers, the greatest personality, the Supreme Lord who gives his blessings. So they were also devoted to the teachings of the previous acharyas, including Yamunacharya, and to the Alvars or the Ajvas, who were the saints of that tradition from about 500 years or 300 years previously. So Ramanuj grew up hearing the bhajans, called prabandhams, recited by his parents. And he was actually very much attracted by hearing about the glories of the Lord and hearing these pastimes. And he was recognized as being a spiritual child. He was very beautiful and extremely effulgent and very devoted to his studies. So he passed quickly through the different sanskars, and he practiced, and he was very dutiful, learning all of the different branches of Vedas appropriate for his age. So by the age of 16, he'd been given Brahman initiation and was qualified to engage in deity worship, and he also married at that time when he was 16 years old. So at that time then he decided he wanted to find a guru to teach him how to study the more philosophical sections of the Vedas, specifically the Upanishads. So he approached a guru who was respected in that community, whose name was Yadava Prakash. But on a couple of occasions, Ramanuja realized that this Yadava Prakash was actually a Mayavadi, and that he'd been influenced by the schools coming from Shankaracharya, and so but out of respect for the tradition of respecting a guru, and to not to cause any disturbance in the Gurukul, then he didn't voice his opposition, or he just stayed. He stayed there and continued to serve his guru and to accept the training. But on two occasions he couldn't resist but to object to his guru's statements, which he considered to be offensive. So there are several of them related, but two of the most famous ones is that Yadava Prakash was giving a commentary on a verse from the Taittiriya Upanishad, and that is said, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. And it's very simple, and it's a very straightforward description of the qualities of the Supreme, that the Supreme Lord is supreme truth, supreme knowledge, and is eternally situated in supreme truth, supreme knowledge, that this is the nature of Brahman. But Yadava Prakash, the Gurukul, the scholar, he objected to this verse and he tried to twist some impersonal meaning out of it. So he gave the example that it's not possible for a cow to have two horns, broken horns, and to be hornless all at the same time. And similarly, he was saying it's not possible for the supreme absolute truth to be eternal, to be full of knowledge, and to be full of truth at the same time. And therefore, we should consider that that the direct meaning is incorrect. So this is what he was teaching. He was teaching that the direct meaning is incorrect, and that the actual conclusion, Yadava Prakash was saying, is that the actual conclusion is that Brahman, the absolute truth, is without form, and that the obvious meaning is incorrect. So Ramanuja spoke up, and he said a flower. If you want to describe a flower, you can't describe it just with one word or one description. You have to describe the different attributes of the flower. You have to describe the color, the complexity of the design, and the fragrance. And by describing these different attributes of the flower, then you give the correct picture of what the flower is. So Yadava Prakash knew that he was defeated, and he didn't reject, he didn't enter into an argument, but he just made it plain that he didn't like it, that his disciple had contradicted him. So then, but Ramanuja continued to serve in the ashram, and on one occasion he was massaging the body of Yadavacharya with oil. And while he was doing so, Yadava was reading from the Chandogya Upanishad, from a verse which starts, Tasya yata kapyasam. And he was saying that this verse means that Brahman has eyes which are red like the rear end of a monkey. So when Ramanujacharya heard that, then he immediately, it broke his heart, and he was crying to hear the Supreme Lord be insulted in that way, that this so-called scholar was describing the Supreme Lord as having eyes like the rear end of a monkey. So when he was crying, then his hot tears fell on the body of his guru. So his guru says, "Well, why are you crying?" So then Ramanuja just said, "I'm crying because you're describing like my Ishtadev, my beautiful Lord, and you're comparing his eyes to the rear end of a monkey." He says, that interpretation is completely incorrect. And he described that kapi, which one meaning of the word of kapi is monkey. For example, Krishna's chariot has got a flag with kapi on it, which means the flag bearing the emblem of Hanuman. So kapi can mean monkey, but when one is translating or explaining Sanskrit poetry, one has to take the context in which the word is used, because all Sanskrit words can have at least 5 different meanings. And so the person who's reading it and explaining it, it's his duty to understand which meaning is appropriate for the context. So actually, even before Shankaracharya commented on this verse, there was another Vaishnava Acharya called Tanka, who described that this verse has 6 different meanings, and 3 of those meanings are appropriate, and 3 of those meanings are inappropriate. And Shankaracharya, he chose one of the meanings which was inappropriate, and he wrote a commentary in which he tried to prove that that meaning was not inappropriate. He tried to prove that describing the Supreme Lord's eyes in relationship to the rear end of a monkey was not inappropriate. And because Yadava Prakash was coming in the line of Shankaracharya, then he considered it also that he could use it. Actually, Shankaracharya wasn't saying that you should describe the Lord's eyes as being like the rear end of a monkey, but Shankaracharya was saying that one description of the color red is described as being that color. But Yadava Prakash, he didn't really understand the intricacies. He was taking some pleasure in actually insulting the Lord. He was taking some pleasure in causing pain to those who understood that the Lord has a personal form, has beautiful eyes. Ramanuja said that the best and most appropriate meaning is that God is the power, that the Supreme Lord is the power in the sun, the power of the sun which causes a lotus flower to bloom, and that anyone who worships that Supreme Lord, then they will also bloom in their spiritual life in that way. So on this occasion, Yadava was like really heavily insulted. He felt completely devastated that his disciple had defeated him and insulted him in this way. So he actually kicked him out at that point. But then after he kicked him out, he realized that Ramanuja was like going to destroy his reputation. So he actually invited him back because he didn't want Ramanuja to start like his own school in opposition to Yadava Prakash. So he invited him back. And we don't know why Ramanuja came back, whether he actually knew that the Lord had a plan, or whether he was doing it out of some kind of adherence to the social system. Actually, Ramanuja, on more than one occasion, had a kind of conflict in his mind about how to establish the Varnashram and simultaneously prove that persons born in lower castes could be qualified as being like Mahabhagavad devotees. But anyway, he did go back to Yadava Prakash's school. So now Yadava Prakash was very pleased about this because he thought, I need to kill him. He decided he was going to kill Ramanuja. But he knew that if he killed him, if he got somebody to come in and kill him, some bandit or gangster, he knew he would get a very heavy sinful reaction for it. So he asked his disciples, you have to think of a way of killing Ramanuja Acharya that won't bring a sinful reaction on me. So they got together and they thought about it. So they thought, what we have to do is we have to get him to drown in the Ganges, and then we won't receive a sinful reaction. So that's what they did. They all got together, and and Yadava Prakash as well. They got together and say, okay, we're going on a pilgrimage to the Ganges. which was like 3,000 miles away from, maybe even 4,000 miles. And they were going to Varanasi, and they were going to take a bath in a place we heard about just a couple of weeks ago in Chaitanya Charitamrita. They were going to take a bath in the Madhyakarnika Ghat. So they travelled for many, many weeks. But one of Ramanuja's relatives, his cousin, who was called Govinda Bhatta, he knew about the plot. So he told Ramanuja, and therefore one day Ramanuja just gradually kind of, when they were going through a dense forest, a place called the Vindhya Hills, and Ramanuja just gradually kind of veered away from the main group and then ran. And so the Yadava was very disappointed. Yadava Prakash was very disappointed, didn't know what had happened. But anyway, he was thinking, well, perhaps he'll catch up and join us. Perhaps he'll catch up and join us at Varanasi. So they continued to go to Varanasi. But Ramanuja, he was determined to go back to Kanchipuram, back to his home, and back to the home of his teacher, not Yadava Prakash, but to the home of the other gurus. So he entered into a forest which was very tortuous, and he didn't have any experience of traveling. He'd never really traveled, and he was in the forest, and he was he couldn't find any water. His feet were being cut by the stones and the thorns, and he was in great distress, and he was feeling that he was never going to be able to reach. He felt he was going to die there. And he was praying. He was praying to Lord Varadara. Yes, Lord Varadara. And then in the middle of the night, two hunters, and one man and his wife, who were hunters, they came upon Ramanuja, and they, asked him, how did he end up here? And Ramanuja described what had happened, and they said, "Oh, don't worry, we can get you through the forest and back onto the path to Kanchipuram." So he travelled with them through the night, and then they fell asleep all together in the forest. And then when at daybreak, Ramanuja woke up, and he saw that he was just on the edge of a forest, and he continued walking out onto the clear road. And then just within about 20 minutes, he was back in Kanchipuram. So he realized that these two hunters, they weren't ordinary people. And so he was so overwhelmed. He was actually in ecstasy when he came to... He said, on realizing the Lord's divine intervention, he cried out. He cried, "To Arjuna, O God, thou revealedst thy beatific form, but to me thou hidst thyself under the guise of a fowler," as somebody who hunts birds. Even as Arjuna besought thee, so do I. And then he recited a verse that Arjuna spoke to Krishna at Kurukshetra. Saketi madva prasabam yaduktam. He Krishna, he Yadava, he Saketi. Ajanata mahimanam tavedam maya pramadat pranayena vapi. Yachchavaha satama sakritosi vihara sayasana bhojaneshu. Eko tavapyachyuta tatsamaksham tatshamaye tramaham aprameyam. So Ramanuja Acharya, he was feeling like Arjuna was feeling when he realized who Krishna was. And so Ramanuja said, thinking of you as my friend, I have rashly addressed you, O Krishna, O Yadava, O my friend, not knowing your glories. Please forgive whatever I may have done in madness or in love. I have dishonored you many times, jesting as we relaxed, lay on the same bed, or sat or ate together, sometimes alone, and sometimes in front of many friends. O infallible one, please excuse me for all these offences. So from that day on, then Ramanuj decided to engage in menial service for Lord Varadaraj, and he carried water from a well to the temple every day. So shortly after this, a king approached Yadava Prakash, exclaiming that his daughter had become haunted by a ghost, that she'd become possessed. And the king had heard that Yadava Prakash had some knowledge of how to recite certain mantras from the Vedas that would dispel a ghost. So he sent his servant to the Yadava Prakash's ashram. And Yadava Prakash told some of his servants to go to the palace and say to the princess, or say to the ghost in the princess, on my order, on the order of Yadava Prakash, leave this place. So that's what they did. But the ghost said, get lost, forget it. You're useless. I'm staying here. Actually, the ghost in the body of the princess actually kind of like made some gesture to indicate that it wasn't going to work. So then, but then the ghost said, I'll only leave if Ramanuj comes and tells me to go. So they came back to the ashram, and they told their spiritual master that the ghost said, I'm only going to go if Ramanuj comes. So they all went, including Yadavacharya, all of his disciples, and Ramanuj went as well, to the king's palace. And so then the king said, okay, so Ramanuj, please ask the ghost to leave the body of my princess, of my daughter. But then Ramanuj said, well, how will you be convinced that he's left? How will you be convinced that he's left? So then the princess said, in the voice of a ghost, actually it was a Brahma Rakshasa. So I don't know whether he had a princess's voice or whether he had a Rakshasa's voice. But anyway, let's say he had a Rakshasa's voice. So the Rakshasa says, don't worry, after I've left her body, I'll go into that banyan tree over there, and a branch will break and fall. So then Ramanuj said to the princess, or to the Rakshasa, I order you to leave the body of this princess. And just in a couple of seconds, this all done. So at that point, Yadava Prakash actually realized that Ramanuja Acharya was like an empowered personality. And he actually begged him to come back to his ashram. And he asked for his forgiveness and begged him to continue being part of that ashram. And Ramanuj did that. And I just thought that this verse we read from Bhagavatam, Somya, pure and simple, is like amazing how pure and simple Ramanujacharya was. You know, that he like Prahlad, even though his father was trying to kill him, even though Yadava Prakash was trying to kill him, he just remained, because of his pure heart, he was able to accept even just the slightest gesture of begging for forgiveness. So now, at this time, in Srirangam, which was the main, Srirangam was the main Divya Desham of the Sri Vaishnava community. So at that time, the great teacher called Yamunacharya was the head of the Sampradaya. And he was very, very sick. He was leaving his body. So he sent one of his disciples to go and bring Ramanujacharya, because he actually wanted Ramanujacharya to be the next Acharya. And so his disciple went, and with the two of them came back towards Srirangam. But when they approached Srirangam, they saw huge crowds, and then they realized that Yamunacharya had already left his body. So they were both like in unconsolable grief. But because one of them, not Ramanujacharya, the other one, felt it was his duty to console Ramanuj, because he understood that Ramanuj had to be the next Acharya. So he said, you have to come and take the lead. So last rites for Yamunacharya, and his body was there, and he died in Samadhi, and he was still actually although he was dead, he'd left his body, but he was still looking, very sober and very attractive. And Ramanuj noticed something. He said, "Why are three of his fingers down?" And his disciples said that they believed this was because three of his goals in life had not been achieved. So the first goal was that, or the things that he was concerned about, that he was concerned that three things would not be maintained in the Sampradaya. So the first thing that he was afraid that wouldn't be maintained is that due respect would not be shown to Krishna Dvaipayana Vyas and to Parashara Muni. He also was afraid that love was not expressed, or that appreciation and veneration was not given to Nama Alva, who was like an amazing poet, in the Bhakti tradition. And the third was, he was afraid that the Vedanta Sutra, the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads would not be protected from the attack of Mayavadis, and that the teachings of his Sampradaya would become degraded, and that impersonalism would become rife. So then Ramanuja, he actually vowed that he would fulfill all of those, and then immediately the three fingers popped up, and it was like, so Yamunacharya was saying, "Yes, I give you my blessings." So shortly after this, Ramanuja accepted another guru. He didn't really have a guru, because Yadavacharya definitely wasn't a guru, but he accepted a guru from a Vaishya Sampradaya, from a Vaishya family, a greatly elevated devotee called Kanchi Purna. He was criticized for breaking the Varnashram tradition, because in the Varnashram tradition you shouldn't accept a guru from a lower Varna. But he recognized that this Kanchi Puran was a Mahabhagavat, a pure devotee of the Lord. And to prove and to assert to his critics that he wasn't going to be sort of dissuaded from accepting his guru, then he invited his guru to lunch at his house, which was really frowned upon in that kind of very strict Brahminical society. So he invited his guru to his house, and in fact he decided he would go personally to his guru's house and bring him. But when he was going to his guru's house to bring him, then the guru was coming in a different road, and so the guru, Kanchi Purnam, he arrived at Ramanuja's house when he wasn't there, and his wife was there. So his wife said, my husband wanted to give you a meal, please sit down, take your meal. So So Kanchipuram sat down and took the meal, and then he left. And after he'd gone, then Ramanuja's wife, she cleaned the place where he'd been sitting down, and she threw the prasadam out onto the street, and like cleaned the whole house, because she was considering that the whole house had become contaminated. So then when Ramanuja returned, and he heard what had been done, then he said, you ignorant person, you've offended my spiritual master. But he also felt, why has this happened? Why has the Lord allowed this to happen when it was not my intention? Perhaps the Lord is saying to me that I shouldn't be so rash in trying to break the tradition. And because I'm the Sampradaya Acharya, I'm here not just to establish the transcendental truths, but I'm also to establish the social traditions which will facilitate the emergence of the higher truths. So he didn't kind of continue to try to prove that point. However, what he did, he expressed these doubts to his spiritual master. He expressed these doubts to Kanchipunam, and he asked Kanchipunam to go to the temple and ask the Lord to help him understand. So Kanchipuram went to the temple of Lord Varadadev, and before he asked the questions, then the Lord revealed to him in his heart that he already knew those questions, and he gave the 6 answers. And the first 5 of the questions are very philosophical, about tattva and the jivas, and about beda tattva and things like that. But the last of the questions was that you should accept Kanchipunam as your guru. So in this way, the Supreme Lord confirmed that Kanchipuram, although from a lower caste, was actually qualified to be Ramanuja's guru. I just want to one mention thing about that pastime with the princess and the Brahma Raksha. The Brahma Raksha informed Yadva Prakash that in his previous life he'd been an iguana. There you go. So it's and he'd eaten a bar of chocolate. No, but anyway, this is true. So the Brahma Raksha, who'd haunted the body of the princess, he explained that in his previous life, he'd been living in a hole, like in the ground somewhere, and some Paramahamsas had their meal there, and they'd thrown the remnants into the hole, and the iguana had eaten the remnants, that was Yadavacharya. Yadavacharya was the iguana in his previous life. Yeah. So in one sense, he had some devotional credits, but he'd become contaminated in some way. So I'll stop there anyway. There's lots of other amazing pastimes, but these are the prominent ones from the early part of Ramanuja's life. Sri Ramanuja Acharya ki. Yeah. Sri Sampradaya ki. Yeah. Srila Prabhupada ki. Yeah. Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki. Sadhu.